Hello everyone, my name is Alexis, and most of you who are watching this video will already know who I am, because you're pretty much going to be directed here from my cybersecurity channel. So I essentially run a cybersecurity channel on YouTube where I've been getting a lot of questions, a lot of life-related, productivity-related questions. And, I thought, why not answer them, on my own channel, primarily because they relate to a larger group of people, including the subset that is frequently in touch with me, which is all about technology. But again, the question that I typically get around procrastination is, I get, really procrastinated, or I procrastinate a lot and I can't get any work done, right? And procrastination is becoming a big problem or a big issue, and it's a bit of a buzzword, and that's what I seek to clarify or to demystify in this video, because I think a lot of people look at procrastination at a very surface level, or really don't take a look at what's happening underneath, or why you're procrastinating in the first place. So procrastinating, firstly, is entirely natural. There's a reason it's happening, and you need to understand that, and you're not the only person suffering from procrastination. Now, there are various levels of procrastination, and there are some people or some individuals who don't even know that they're procrastinated. It's become such a matter of habit, to procrastinate and put things off, and absolutely ignore what needs to be done now and do it at the very last moment. And this is a problem, and it's especially a problem when you don't realize it, and your whole life, or you go through your entire life not knowing that you've given really, really poor efforts, or you've put in very poor effort on the work that you're doing, primarily because you've been doing it essentially in the last minute or on deadline day, right? So I want to start off by explaining in my own way what procrastination is. And of course, I'm not going to get into the whole biology behind it at a deep level, but very simply, procrastination is the putting off of doing something, a task, a project, anything, a chore, because, the main feeling, or the consensus around the feeling, is that you don't feel like doing it, right? Now, that's a very, top level understanding of what a typical, 18-year-old would tell you is, I procrastinate when I need to do something, and they think that it's something wrong with them, or they're just not in the right environment, or they're easily getting distracted, which is part of the problem. But procrastination, sort of a brief definition, if I can give you one, is when you need to do something, right? It could be a task, it could be a project, it could be a chore, and your brain says, hey, that looks like it's going to be hard, or it's going to be taxing, it's going to require some level of commitment and concentration. We don't need to do that now. And the reason it's saying this is because, obviously, your brain is tuned or accustomed to having short-term reward over long-term reward. So I'll just explain a few things regarding how dopamine works in the brain, because this is also becoming quite a big topic, but not a lot of people understand this, right? So when you get a reward, it could be anything. When you eat a piece of cake, when you, whenever something good happens to you, typically how you define it, when someone smokes a cigarette, when they drink alcohol, you essentially get a whole lot of dopamine in your brain, right? And now dopamine in the brain essentially means neurochemistry wise, it means that, hey, something good has happened, and your brain keeps track of this, right? And it keeps track of this and builds it into a habit loop, or tries to identify a potential habit loop. So a typical example of this is when someone gets up, they immediately start smoking. And of course, I'm using a very general example here. They start smoking, they get their hit of nicotine, and of course that gives them a rush or makes them feel good, and they get the hit of dopamine, and the brain identifies that this is a cycle, and it starts to form a habit, right? Now, people think that when in the context of a cigarette, now I'm using this because it's one of the main problems where people really don't understand addiction is being caused by dopamine, not really nicotine, because nicotine is just a chemical, right? it's because nicotine makes you feel good or gives you a rush or it gives you a desired euphoric feeling. And I'm saying that very generally speaking when it comes down to other drugs as well. That feeling is desired because, again, from an evolutionary perspective, you are attuned to, to actually seeking out these experiences or these things or these foods that make you feel that way. So it's really not your fault that, you're feeling good and your brain constantly wants this. So given that you know that now, that your brain really isn't your ally or really isn't intelligent when it comes down to building good or bad habits, you need to be in control of this. And you need to understand, firstly, that reward is very important to the brain. So whenever you do something that is, it could be either be good or bad, and you get a reward, that is going to be an enforced habit, or your brain will try and make that into a habit. It'll try and create a loop so that you keep doing it because it's desired, right? And this is where the problem comes in. You can form a good habit and you can form a bad habit. So, for example, if you form a habit around running. So, for example, you say, when I get back from work, I'm going to run, and at the end of my run, I get a reward. It could be anything. It could be, a cup of tea, a cup of cake, whatever makes you feel good, right? And you build that habit, and you incorporate it into your life, and you have a good habit, a productive habit, a proactive habit, one that's improving your life. It's making your life better, unlike smoking. So the question is, where does procrastination come into play? As I said, going back to the whole idea of dopamine. So your brain will essentially look at a task and say, that's kind of hard. And if it doesn't identify a reward, if it doesn't see that there's anything particular that I can get right now, the task might give you some money in the future, right? You may be completing a project that's 2 years long, and you're not going to get paid until the 2 years are done. So your brain's going to say, hey, this isn't important to me right now. This is going to give me nothing in the context of a reward. So when it comes down to dopamine, you feel that pain in your head, and that pain is being caused by your brain. It's essentially a brain saying, this isn't worth it from an evolutionary perspective, right? Because your brain is looking for short-term reward, not long-term. And we know in life that long-term reward is very, very, very important. It's much more important to have long-term success over short-term success, right? So short-term pleasures like drinking, alcohol, sex, all of these are short-term rewards. And these are the exact things that your brain, for a very long time has been accustomed through, for thousands of years. And that's perfectly fine. But we live in a world now where long-term success or sacrificing your time now for long-term success is the best strategy for success, if I can say so. All right, so that's essentially procrastination in a nutshell. Your brain essentially says, hey, I don't like this. This is not going to give us anything. So that's the first tip, or the first trick, is to now start building good habits around doing work. So for example, if you say, I'm going to sit down and work for 25 minutes to 45 minutes, and at the end of that time, I'm going to give myself a reward. I'm going to say, I'm going to have a cup of tea. I'm going to browse the internet a little bit. Could be anything that makes you happy or that gives you a shot of dopamine, however small it is. So once there's an associated reward, then it becomes much easier to do it. Now, of course, this seems like a very simple piece of advice, but not a lot of people understand this because firstly, they haven't even understood, the level to which they're procrastinating every day. Because, if someone gets an email and they put it off, because again, it's hard to answer an email. It involves reading, comprehension, and they put it off, for 1 or 2 days, and they get back to it when they feel like, or whenever they have free time. That's procrastination. And, that's not a good thing to be doing in the long term. In the short term, hey, I'm not answering my email for 2 days. What's the worst that could happen, right? It sort of builds into a bad habit, and so on and so forth. You get the idea that bad habits also become perpetual. A cycle is formed. And if unchecked, you can really form your life or have a life with bad habits. So as I was saying, when we talk about habits at a general level, you have your cue, right? I'll just use the whiteboard here. You have your cue, and then you have your routine, And this is, just a basic overview of habits, and then you have your reward, right? And this is essentially what your brain is trying to look for. And it's looking for a very short span in terms of the routine. So, there's a cue. The cue could be anything, as I'll point out. That's up to you. You then have the routine, which involves doing a certain task or doing something. And then you get the reward, which in most cases is going to be your shot of dopamine. And because you get dopamine, the brain says, hey, let's make this into a cycle. Let's repeat this and make this into what we then call a habit, right? Because it's desirable. So a cue in the case of a cigarette would be, waking up. So you can say wake up, and then you form a routine saying I'll light a cigarette. So I'll light a cigarette. And the reward is you get your dopamine hit, right? And your brain then starts forming this habit, and you keep repeating it. And, over the period of, a few months, you have a fully formed habit, which is a big problem because it's a degenerative habit. Now, if we take this concept and we start applying, some positive attributes to it, or trying to form positive habits, like, for example, studying every day, which is something that a lot of you students will be doing. We can talk about studying. So what you can say now, the most important thing is to understand your reward, because if you don't give yourself a good reward, it's not going to be worth it. That's very important. So remember, the reward can be anything you like. In many students' cases, I've seen them playing games for 15 minutes. They can play games for 15 minutes. They can go out and take a walk. Whatever gives you or gets you going, whatever makes you feel good, that you should set up a reward around that, right? And you say now, okay, you should now start forming the cue. So let's say you have a fixed set of tasks you do every day and a schedule. So you say when I get back home, I'm going to do I'm just gonna change my clothes maybe, and then number 2. You set up your cue as after you've changed your clothes. And this is just an example. So you say after I change, that is the cue for studying. So you say this: the routine is sit down, open book or laptop, and study for 15 minutes. And you set a timer, or 25 minutes, and you set a timer, and you say at the end of this, I'm going to get what I desire most, or a reward that is attractive to me, or that one that I feel is worth this actual process. And this is going to be very difficult to begin with, because most students, as I've said or I've seen, actually have a problem with this here. So it's very important that you understand your reward, and this will take time and effort, to actually discover what it is you'll get out of it. But a quick way of understanding this is to actually analyze the bad habits that you have and look at the rewards you get when of course you do something, a degenerative habit. So for example, smoking, you can analyze what makes you feel good. And of course, I don't recommend smoking a cigarette after you're studying, although it does work. And many people have formed this habit where, in their daily routine, they'll say, hey, they form this subconsciously. They say, I'll complete maybe 2 hours of work every morning. So from 8 to 10, they essentially get a lot of work done, and say at 8 or at 10:30 we'll have a smoke break, right? And so because of that reward, they actually go ahead and always do this. So that's what people don't understand, right? Is whenever you're doing something that's difficult, complicated, or that requires some level of effort, it's going to require you doing something difficult or strenuous. There has to be a reward. That's just how our brains are set up. Now, the second question that I usually get regarding procrastination is willpower, right? So willpower. Now, the problem I have with willpower is great for, doing something like lifting the last 2 or performing the last 2 reps in a set when you're at the gym. That's how I personally see it. Willpower cannot usurp bad habits. A solid understanding of how you're forming bad habits and good habits is probably the most important, because, as I said, if you don't adhere to a particular habit, or you don't form a habit out of studying or doing something, Maybe, if you're working on a project that's not repetitive and you need to do it immediately, then what I'd recommend doing is, for example, if you have a big project, maybe that stretches over a few months, is then you break down that large project, right? So you have a big project here and you break it down into smaller pieces that can be done every day, and you form a habit out of that, right? So you form a habit, and of course the habit will not last long, because once the project is done, that habit will gradually disappear because you don't need to do the work. So take a big project and then break it down into things you can do every day, and of course things that are actionable, that will actually give you concrete results. And then again, you set it up, you form the habit, you say, when I get back from work, 1 hour will be spent working on this project, and it's non-negotiable. After it, I can do whatever I want, right? And so that way you get your project done. You don't procrastinate, because a lot of people look at this large project and they say, wow, that's a lot of work, and that causes pain in your brain. Your brain is like, wow, that's a lot of work, let's do it tomorrow, let's do it then the day after, let's keep on postponing it until the reward is so close, or we're almost there, and then we start working on it. Which brings me to my second point, or my third point rather, around procrastination. And that is the ability to understand projects, right? And tasks and things that need to be done now, and things that need to be done over a set of days, over a set of time. So again, let's take the example of a big project. I'll just use the large box to denote that, and we call this project, right? And pardon my bad handwriting. So project, and this is large. It's going to be 2 months. Or you have a deadline of 2 months. So a lot of people will say, you know what, I can do it in the second month. I don't need to do it right now. But a smarter approach would be to analyze it, to clearly analyze the project, and then come up with outcomes, right? So what are the desired outcomes? What do I want to, or what needs to be done to complete this project? What needs to be done so that I can say, check, and we're done with that project. Secondly, you then decide what needs to be done, as I said. So what needs to be done? And you need to write this down. You need to note it down. And the third thing now, as I said, is to build a habit out of this, or to actually fit this into your schedule and have you do it every day. Now, the reason I say every day is because once you get through the first week, it then becomes natural to work on the project, and especially after you've identified the reward that you want to give yourself. So it could be anything. It could be, I'm going to play video games after that for 30 minutes, and I can then have dinner. So you form the habit. So break it down into smaller steps. Break down into smaller steps that are achievable, that are actionable every day. So you can say, I'll work on the project for 1 hour a day, and after work, right? And it could be anything. It could be after lunch, and you then set that in your calendar. So you want to set this in your calendar, and you want to set reminders so that you don't forget, and you want to build a habit out of this. And again, identify the reward. The reward is a very personal thing. I'm not going to give you any recommendations, right? So that is the process of breaking down a large complex project into smaller steps. This is probably one of the most important things. Now, a lot of people really don't get this. Most of the people are not natural procrastinators. They just have really bad habits. And one of the worst things that has come into the workplace is internet and the social media applications, or social networks like Instagram, Facebook. And say Facebook, we have the Instagram, and we have Twitter, and you then have your mobile phone always in your pocket, essentially giving you access to anything you want. You want internet, you want porn, you want games. Hey, everything's in there. You want music. You can get pretty much everything you need in regards to short-term reward. So if you want instant gratification, you want to see the amount of likes you got, check. You want to listen to music and enjoy yourself a little bit, check. You want to watch, X-rated movies, check. I'm not judging anyone. I'm just simply saying what people use it mostly for. You want to play games, check. All right, so these are all short-term rewards. Using your phone really has no long-term benefit. It simply allows you to communicate, and most people have actually forgotten that. It's become mostly a camera. Most of the phones nowadays are simply just glorified cameras. with the purpose of photographing yourself, and that's what most people enjoy. And I'm not judging you if you feel that's the best way to spend your time or your life is to constantly be recording everything or taking pictures of your food, then that's perfectly fine. I'm simply saying it's not a good long-term strategy. A phone is a tool. It's always been a tool, but now with these applications, the applications and the application design have started becoming coercive in that they will actually make you do things that you don't want to do, or you're not consciously going to do it. I'll give you an example. I have a calculator on my desk here, right? Let me just grab that and I'll show you, right? So I have a calculator here. It's a simple, standard calculator. And this is a tool similar to what a phone is. But let me give you an example of where the problem comes in. So a tool, like a calculator, a hammer, is only useful when you need to use it, right? So when I need to do some calculations, I whip out my calculator, right? And why do I prefer having a real calculator next to me? Well, because it fulfills one purpose, one function, okay? So that's the example of a tool. Now, the problem with a phone is, as I said, it is a tool, but what's happening with these applications is they are making people do things that they don't want to do or are not conscious of. So the phone now essentially is enticing a person, right? So this is you here, and you now constantly are looking at this device for that instant gratification. And I know a lot of people talk about this, but what they don't understand is the phone really has morphed. And this came about with the advent of internet on older phones. If you remember the flip phones, and at the time it wasn't so bad. But when I really started seeing a shift was around 2007 or 8, when you started having social networks, and people started seeing that they could get liked just for posting a picture or just for being themselves, which is interesting in and of itself. But your phone is now not a tool anymore. It really is not a tool. People use it less for calling than ever before, less for communicating. And of course, most of you will say social networks are communication based. Not really. They are non-essential communication. And of course, I'm talking about the masses here. A lot of people who are communicating in the form of comments and likes, this is all garbage. It's all unnecessary. No one needs it. Social networks are an absolute waste of time. Interconnectivity, or the interconnectedness of our lives today, well, not my life, but of many people's lives, essentially revolves around scrolling through what other people are doing. Now, this brings up issues on its own, which we'll not get into. But I'm simply saying that your phone is a literal casino slot machine that people keep on pulling or swiping down on, to get that latest notification, because that makes you feel good, So with your phone around, I can almost guarantee you will constantly be procrastinating. It does not matter what you try and do, whether you silence it, as long as it's within arm's length or arm's reach. You will go to your phone and you will look through it, and you'll waste 1 hour on your phone watching YouTube videos, playing games, and while you could have been doing your work. That's the second thing. You have YouTube, and the easy availability of videos, funny videos, controversial videos, educational videos, which are helpful, but again, all of these things are not good in the long term. And of course, I'm leaving out the exception of educational videos, but YouTube, generally speaking, again, is a tool, but now it's become a coercive system that actually forces people to constantly watch it, and that's through the algorithm. So they have the recommended videos, so then you keep going down the rabbit hole, because remember, YouTube as a company does not want you to live a healthy life. They want you to watch. If they could get you to watch videos for 24 hours a day, they could do it, and that's why they have the recommended videos. So you keep going down the recommended videos and you don't stop, and the only reason you stop, most people stop, is because they need to sleep. And that even, of course, that'll be a very poor quality sleep session they have, because they've been watching videos till 2 a.m. and then they wonder why they're tired and depressed and they can't get anything done because they sleep for 5 hours And then they go to work and they say, I'm tired, I'm going to put this off to tomorrow. All right, go back home, watch YouTube, and you can see now how bad habits are being created. So most of the procrastination comes from extremely bad habits. The fact that you have a distraction center right next to you, a literal lottery machine or a slot machine, not a lottery machine, but a slot machine that will give you your instant shots, your instant shots of dopamine, as quickly and as plentifully as you want them. And so you get them and you feel great. And after a while, of course, because all uppers in terms of drugs must come down, you have the crash and you're feeling shit, and you have not completed your work, and that makes you feel shit, and the cycle keeps on repeating. You go back to YouTube to feel good. You watch it till the 3 a.m., you sleep for 5 hours, you feel shit. You wake up, you go to work, you say, this is too much for me, I'm too tired anyway, you're yawning, you need coffee, maybe let me watch some YouTube videos, make myself feel good. Okay, watch YouTube videos. Oh, I had that task to do. I'm too tired now, I haven't done anything yet. We'll do it tomorrow. All right, so the cycle continues. People put off things, and they hardly ever get to even sit down for 1 hour of concentrated work. Now, this may seem like a rant. It's not a rant. It's simply the truth. And I'm here trying to help you. So, just to highlight what I've covered. Number one, procrastination is when you feel that, again, you could be doing something that will give you a reward right now instead of doing something that will have a positive in the long term as opposed to the short term. So, again, when it comes down to countering or avoiding procrastination, is number one, identify and understand the fact that whenever you feel like procrastinating, that it's natural. Your brain is essentially saying you should be doing something that will give you instant reward or gratification, and what you have to do is say, well, I can have that reward after the work, right? Or to give yourself a reward. Now, this is not going to work on its own. You also need to, as I said, form a habit around it. So form a habit. Number one is going to be your reward. So reward, and you need to identify this. And then you form a habit, and then you then have that going. So you have the habit, you have the reward, and of course the routine is going to be doing the actual task or the work. And of course this can be generalized. You can say, hey, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. I'm going to work, get everything I need to get done, and then after that, only after that, can I start watching YouTube videos or doing whatever the hell other people do whenever they're procrastinating. Only then. All right. The third thing that a lot of people have a problem with is they look at all the work that needs to be done and they see the outcome, they see the end goal, which is this huge project, right? So they see this huge project and it's huge and there's a lot of things that need to be done and they feel pain. The brain says, wow, that, you know what, I don't see any reward coming out of that right now. So, hey, YouTube video might be nice now, and we'll do that tomorrow. There's plenty of time. We have 2 months left, so we'll deal with it next week or something like that. Yeah, let's go and watch YouTube. So break down projects. So break down projects into something that you can do in half an hour, in 15 minutes, in 10 minutes, whatever is comfortable for you. All right. And then number 5 is get rid of all the distractions, right? So get rid of distractions. This is a big problem nowadays that you find. Get rid of these distractions. These things are not going to do good for you or anyone. And now YouTube is helpful. Music is great, but they need to be consumed in moderation. And clearly nowadays, you can tell they're not being consumed in moderation. Social networking applications, when you go to work, just turn everything off and keep your phone somewhere else. Turn off the internet if required, if that's your level of addiction. Just turn it all off and see how good you'll feel when you essentially get offline, when you turn everything off and you just get off the internet for just 1 hour. That's it. People can't even read nowadays because they read and they say, well, maybe I should check my email. Maybe I got something important there that is going to be pivotal to my life and career. And the answer to that is, of course not. That's not the case. and you're going to say, well, I can get the reward right now. I mean, should I be reading this book? Well, what's this book going to help me with right now? It's just words and paragraphs, and it might be helpful, but I want to feel good now. So you need to get rid of distractions. All right. And of course, this is the fourth option. And the last option is to, as I said, build habits. But if you want to be extra, or you want to be proactive with this process, I would recommend using a Pomodoro timer, right? Now, Pomodoro timers don't work for everyone, and they essentially allow you to set a fixed duration of time. So they say 25 minutes is recommended to, I think, about 40 minutes of work. And they say after that, you get a break time. So they say 5 to 15 minutes of break. And within this period of time, you can do whatever you want. That'll make you feel good. But then once that's done, you then return to your initial session, or you create another session and you do 40 minutes of uninterrupted, undisrupted work. All right, so that's essentially all that I wanted to cover in regards to procrastination. Understanding it is very important. Understanding the fact that most of you will have bad habits that are actually enabling procrastination, or are making it impossible to actually control your procrastination, because again, you don't have a fixed schedule, you don't have a plan, you don't break down projects into smaller tasks that you can achieve, and you really need to start doing that. You need to understand that procrastination is your brain simply saying, this is going to be difficult now, and it doesn't seem like there's any reward. So, hey, let's do it another time. So you need to create a reward and say, hey, I'll get the reward after I do this. And then that, it gives you a bit of motivation, because your brain will say, well, okay, if we do this, then yeah, I'm okay for this. So we can actually concentrate. And then once you start giving it a reward and rewarding good behavior or good habits like reading, your brain is going to say, okay, well, that's a habit that'll make me feel good, so I'm going to make this into a habit. And before you know it, with the example of that I was giving you regarding working on a project after work, you're going to be doing that naturally, right? So that's essentially what I wanted to take you guys through. And of course, this is more of a lengthy discussion and a rant, but it's very important that I have this with young students, because procrastination can and will ruin your life if unchecked, if left unchecked. And it's better now than ever to start remedying it. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to have a lot of issues, but at the end of the day, you can say, I've begun the process of countering it, and within a few years, you should have complete control and grasp of it, and you should be able to start forming good habits, desirable habits like reading, like walking, like exercising, like eating well, eating healthy, eating at the right time, etc., etc. So that's pretty much all that I'm going to be covering in this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.